Cheers! Welcome to my channel. In this video, I will discuss about points to remember in oral interpretation. Although the term oral interpretation may be new to you, the experience of interpreting literature is part of everyday life. Lawyers read evidence to a jury, pastors read prayers, parents and teachers read to their children. You may also remember how much you enjoyed being read to as a child. In this lesson, you will learn how to prepare for oral interpretation. You will learn the characteristics of oral interpretation, how to select appropriate literature, quality material for oral interpretation, and how to analyze that material. First is the characteristics of oral interpretation. Oral interpretation involves the performing of literature allowed to communicate meaning to an audience. An interpreter analyzes the literature and uses his or her voice to communicate the results of the analysis. The interpreter is the connection between the literature and the audience. There are major differences between oral interpretation and public speaking or acting. First is that you are not the author. You are performing literature written by another person. You are not sharing your own personal thoughts and feelings as you would in public speaking. Second is you perform the author's words by direct reading. As an interpreter, you bring to life the exact words of another person. Third is you interpret a piece of literature. You are not trying to create a message to persuade or inform your listeners. Instead, you are trying to help the listeners see the images you are creating orally. Your goal is to share the meaning of the literature as you interpret it. Fourth is you remain yourself during the performance. When you are acting, you take on the role of a character in a play. When you interpret, you use your voice and body to suggest the mood or the characters, but you do not become a character. Second is appropriate literature for oral interpretation. Here are some of the many kinds of literature you could use for oral interpretation. Favorite authors. You are already emotionally invested in the authors you like. Literature collections, for example, your English textbook. Biographies or autobiographies. Plays or screenplays. As you select your performance material, think about these standards: the quality of the literature, its audience appeal, the oral possibilities of the literature, and your feelings for the piece. Quality of the material. Good literature has certain characteristics. It has a theme that connects the reader or listener to common human experiences such as love, anger, joy, and pain. It also has conflict, the struggle between two opposing forces. All people have experienced conflict within themselves, with other people, or with nature. The literature should help the reader see ordinary ideas in a new way. The material should excite the reader's imagination. For example, teachers read a poem that illustrates this. For example, Foul Shot by Edwin Howe, trying to accomplish a goal under pressure. Audience appeal. Ask yourself how your listeners will respond to the material you selected. Is it appropriate for the age, concerns, and feelings of your audience? Or does the piece fit the occasion? Oral possibilities. Can your listener grasp the meaning of your piece in just one reading? You don't get a second chance. If the language is too difficult or sentence structure too complex, that literature is not appropriate for reading aloud. Your feelings. You must feel a connection to the material. You cannot expect an audience to get excited over a piece that has no meaning for you. If you don't feel connected to the literature, you will have a hard time communicating its meaning to your audience. Third is analyzing literature. Did you know that Catherine Patterson wrote Bridge to Terabithia as a way to help her son understand the death of his friend? Did you know Anne Frank actually was between 12 and 14 years old when she wrote in her diary? As you prepare for a performance, you must become very familiar with the literature you have selected. The better you understand the piece, the easier it will be to communicate its meaning to your audience. There are 4 keys to analyze literature. You need to look at the dramatic speaker, the elements of the literature, the language, and the author. First is the dramatic speaker. This is the voice that is heard as you perform your piece. This is the person telling the story or describing the scene. It is not the author's voice, but a voice created by the author. The voice may belong to a character in the piece or to narrator who is not part of the action. Who is the dramatic speaker in the following cuttings? The search for the dramatic speaker or speakers is your first step because you will want to behave and speak as if you were that speaker. For example, if your speaker is a child, you will not want to sound like an adult. If your speaker is a wise old woman, you will not want to sound like a bored teenager. Second is elements of literature. As you analyze your piece, you will need to look at elements such as setting, plot, mood, theme, conflict, characters, and culture. Setting. The time and place of the literature creates a setting for the performance. Plot. The plot or storyline must be made clear to your listeners. If you are doing a cutting from a story or book, you must be sure share any main points of the plot with the audience in the introduction. Mood. The interpreter creates the mood or emotional feeling of the literature. This is done through nonverbal messages as facial expressions and piece. For example, a humorous piece might be faster paced with quick movements and have many smiles, where a serious piece might need a slower pace and more serious facial expressions. Theme. Finding the theme or main idea of the piece lets you know that to emphasize in your performance. Some examples are Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Friendship can be found in many places. The Planet of John Brown by Virginia Hamilton. Pride in individuality is important. An oral interpretation performance may contain a number of pieces of literature that have a similar theme. Conflict. Conflict is at the heart of most literature. Without conflict, it would be hard for an audience to get involved in a story. Conflicts can exist internally, within characters, or between characters. They can also exist between characters and the environment. Characters. Interpreters need to understand their characters in order to get a sense of how to portray them in the performance. Our study should include their appearance, words, language, actions, attitudes, and what other characters say about them. Culture. Many words of literature are written from a cultural perspective different than your own. You need to study the culture to get a better sense of what your character is about. You also need to be sure you are comfortable using the dialect of the culture and be sure you can pronounce foreign words correctly. Third is language. As an interpreter, you need to study the author's word choice, style, and rhythm and rhyme. If you don't understand why something is expressed in a certain way, you can communicate its meaning to an audience. Word choice. You need to quote the author exactly as it is written. The words were chosen for a reason and should not be changed. Style. The way a piece was written helps create the mood or feeling for your listeners. Writers use imagery, descriptive, and figurative language to appeal to listeners' eyes and ears. Rhythm and rhyme. All poems have rhythm. You need to determine what it is. Some poems are rhyme. You must decide how you will read it. For example, if you read a rhyme poem in a sing-song fashion, you will create a different message than if you read the lines naturally and thoughtfully. 4 is author. You can understand a piece of literature better by studying its author. Try and find out of what time in the life of the author the piece was written. What was going on in his or her life? Is there a significance to the time or setting, or on what themes does the author generally write? 4 is preparing the material. 2 important steps in preparing your piece for performance are cutting the literature and create an introduction. Cutting. Sometimes a piece of literature is too long and it must be cut. Cutting the literature means shortening it by taking out parts without changing its meaning. In shortening a piece, you can cut or remove the following: unnecessary descriptions. Some descriptions may add interest to the written piece but not be needed in presenting the main idea or feelings. Descriptions of action or manner of speaking. Statements like Madison shot him as angry glance can be cut because you can create that feeling with voice and facial expression. Any phrases that you can show with facial, voice, or gestures can be removed. Some statements of he said or she said, since you are creating the characters through your voice and nonverbal actions, you can leave out words that tell who is speaking. Offensive words. Any words that might upset listeners can be substitute, exception to the rule of not changing words, or removed. Unnecessary characters. Sometimes minor characters are in a scene for a short time. You may cut that character's lines as long as it does not change the meaning of the scene. Creating an introduction. Generally speaking, the interpreter gives a short teaser or beginning of the piece and then closes the script to give a memorized introduction. Effective introductions do the following. Capture the audience attention. Tell the author and the title. Give any necessary background information about the piece or author. Set the scene. If possible, tie the piece to the audience experiences. Fifth is using your voice and body. To begin, this of yourself as the dramatic speaker. There is a fine line between acting and interpretation. If the dramatic speaker is an uninvolved narrator or observer, your voice and body should reflect that. If the dramatic speaker is a character in the middle of an argument, your voice and body should show the character's anger. Remember, however you are interpreting the material, not acting it out, you are sharing the story with your listeners with your voice and body. In the nonverbal part of your performance, you need to consider sense recall, use of voice and use of body. Sense recall. Sense recall is remembering physical experiences you have had, which will help to suggest images or sense memories to your audience. Physical experiences you recall include sounds, taste, smells, touch, and sights. Body recall. Body recall is when you remember your kinesthetic of or bodily responses when you had feelings such as fear, anger, anxiety, or great joy. For example, if you are interpreting a piece where the character is afraid of an intruder in her home, you would want to recall a situation where you were very afraid and use that feeling for your character. Use of your voice. Your voice will sound different depending on the tone of the piece and who your characters are. Volume can have a great effect on your performance. For example, a shy character would speak more softly than a confident one. An angry character would speak more loudly than a sad one. As a narrator, you would speak more softly to describe a peaceful scene than you would to describe a hurricane coming through. Your pitch will vary as you read male or female, adult or child voices. An excited person has a pitch higher than a depressed one. Suggest the differences with your voice but don't exaggerate it. Your rate of speech will be faster or slower depending on the text. An excited person may speak faster than an older character. When you are shifting to a new character or changing the mood, you can use pauses to obtain the desired effect. Pauses can also create suspense. Vocal quality can also be used. For instance, you might use a raspy tone for an old man or a nasal tone for an annoying character. You may also want to use an accent, but beware if you can't do it well. It will be distracting. In that case, it would be better not to do it at all. Use of body. You bring characters to life by using posture, gestures, and facial expressions. As an interpreter, you will remain with your feet planted in most cases. You cannot use movements such as walking, falling, or touching others. You may use gestures such as shrugging your shoulders, pointing your fingers, or scratching your head. You may throw a punch at the audience to represent a fight, but you won't actually get into a fist fight with another character. You can create a mood with your posture such as an embarrassed child by rounding your shoulders forward and hanging your head toward your chest. Your facial expression should quickly communicate the mood of the piece to your audience. A joyous mood can be shown with a smile, and a scary mood can be shown by tension in your face. Because you can't use large movements, you may want to exaggerate your facial and expressions a little to communicate the meaning. Sixth is eye focus. You usually look at the audience when you are performing, scanning the audience slowly and posing, holding your gaze and every once in a while before continuing to scan. However, if you have more than one character, one way to show the difference between the characters is to have a different but consistent eye focus for each character. For example, you may look at a spot on the back wall when speaking as the first character and then shift your eyes to a different spot as the second character. The audience should see your head and eyes move slightly as you switch characters. You don't want to swing your head each time a different character speaks. 7 is preparing a performance script. To prepare a performance script, you must first order the literature pieces in the order you will perform them. Second is mark the pieces to reflect your thinking on how you will perform them. Third is create the overall structure of the performance, including transitions between pieces and insertion of the introduction. Ordering the pieces. When performing several short pieces such as a poetry program, you need to put them in order to create the right mood and keep the audience interested. This is known as weaving the pieces together to create the whole effect. Marking the script. Marking the script involves writing symbols that will help you to remember how to read the script. Any system of symbols will work as long as you know and will remember what they mean. However, here are few suggestions. Tips for marking a script. Poses. Use one diagonal line to show a pose, two diagonal lines to show a longer pose. Emphasis. Use a solid underlining to indicate words to be stressed. A wavy line to underline words that need a special tone or a special emphasis. Pronunciation. Write the letter X over a syllable that needs stress. Movement. Write Q to show a special movement. Rate. Use highlighter colors to show changes in piece. Creating the structure. You need to decide where in the piece your introduction will go. Generally, it will be after a 30-second to 1-minute performance teaser. All your transitions and markings should be noted in the correct place, and your script should be glued onto cardstock or construction paper pages and put in a 3-ring binder. Cut script pages so you are not turning the page in the middle of a paragraph or verse of poetry. The end of the page should be natural pose in the script. 8. Rehearsing oral interpretation. Following are steps to practice the delivery of your oral interpretation. First is read your piece silently 2 or 3 times. Go straight through. Don't stop and start over, and don't go back over any section. Second, repeat step 1 this time aloud. Third, stand up. Give your piece while looking up at regular intervals. Practice gestures and movement. Work with your script. Follow your markings. Complete the entire piece. This is a rehearsal, so it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. It is important to go through the entire piece without stopping. 4 is continue step 3 until you can give the entire piece with all the planned vocal tones and body movements. 9. Practicing relaxation. You will probably be nervous before a performance. You may wish to try some relaxation techniques. Here are some strategies. Use what works for you. First is clench your fist tightly for a count of 10. Release and let your whole body go limp. Second, take a deep breath and hold it for a count of 10. Let it out all at once, letting your body go completely lost and limp. Third is breathe normally. Let your muscles relax more and more as you let out each breath. 4 is let your head hang down so your chin almost touches your chest. Slowly rotate your head in a circle one way and then the other. Do this 2 or 3 times. 5th is imagine yourself on a warm beach, in a hot bath, or anywhere that seems relaxing to you. Breathe slowly and deeply. So that would be all. I hope that you learned something in this video. Thank you for watching.